not going to see the sustained winds, the steady wind at all times. You know, when the reporters are standing out there in the field and the wind's blowing and you see it continuously, right? We're not going to see that. And if we do see anything even remotely close, it will be along the coast. It will not be inland. There's the latest, still moving north. This is updated hourly, so in about 25 minutes, we'll get a new advisory. We'll see if it's still moving north, but the longer this moves north, the more of a threat this is to the Panhandle. And as Jason mentioned a couple minutes ago, in history, right, in history, there has never been a hurricane, a major hurricane or just a hurricane, there's a major hurricane that went into Appalachia Bay. This will be the first, because if it misses Appalachia Bay, it's because it went really far west, and that just does not seem feasible. So winds of 105, it's offshore. This will be a strong 3, and I'm telling you, I'm not convinced that this couldn't be 125 and nearly to 130 at landfall. And that would just be a worst-case scenario for the Panhandle area, including Tallahassee. You know, a lot of us, we've been talking about this for a while. There's several universities in Tallahassee. You've got FSU, you've got LMU, you've got the community college there that feeds FSU. So if you have a major hurricane go very close to Tallahassee, there's going to be massive power outages. In fact, Jason, we haven't talked about that for a while. Why don't you kind of go over what it was like with Hermine? But there will be massive power outages for that area, and it's something unlike they've ever seen. So, and why are we talking about this? Because it's only 25 miles. The track is only 25 miles east of Tallahassee. And the Hurricane Center even said, we think we're going to bump that track westward in this next advisory. And because it continues to move due north, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Jason, why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah, so like we were talking about back in 2016, Hurricane Hermine, Category 1 with only 80-mile-per-hour winds. I say only because this one is going to be significantly stronger than that. Left a lot of Leon County, which is the county, of course, that state capital Tallahassee is located in, without power for weeks. We're talking about some spots even up to a month without power. Now, for us, back when 2017, when Hurricane Irma moved inland and went through sections of Hardy, DeSoto, and Highlands counties, the center of the storm there had 100 to 115 mile per hour winds at that time, and there were places that were without power for 2 to 3 weeks, some lasted to a month. So that was a much weaker storm, but because the infrastructure is so much different in and around the city of Tallahassee, not necessarily buildings, but there's so much foliage, there's so much more trees up there. It's a much more southern Alabama type feel instead of, or South Georgia feel when you get to North Florida, if you're not familiar with that area, because there's less palm trees, there's more pine trees. It's very densely packed foliage and forested there, and that's what's going to create the issues if this comes into the Tallahassee metro as a Category 2, 3, or maybe even 4. That's when we're going to run into the potential to see significant power outages that could leave the colleges and universities, unfortunately, shut down for a couple of weeks. I can't remember exactly how long Hermine did shut down FSU, but it was for a good amount of time, and that could be the same situation in places like FAMU and TCC as well. So here's your hour by hour for us back here at home, and then we'll talk a little more specifically about what the Tallahassee metro area can expect with landfall tomorrow morning. For us, the storm just too far west. It's finally a break for us, a chance to breathe and lose a little bit of our anxiety about these storms taking these right turns. When do they do it? Because right now it's almost latitude with us in west central Florida, and that's going to continue to move north pretty quickly at 16 miles per hour. So the further north it goes, the quicker, the less of a chance, with basically a zero chance now, that it's going to turn to the right. And a lot of you, some of you even asking me on Facebook, why? Why does this happen? How did this happen? And why is the right turn prevalent in Charlie and in Irma and in Dennis, or in Ian, I should say? It's because high pressure. High pressure is to our east. High pressure is basically a circle, and when you have strong high pressure, you can't get a hard right turn into that. It's going to block it. Football terms, if I have to it's going to block it. It's not going to allow it to turn right. If the high was a little farther south, then we could potentially see that turn a bit to our way. But for us, fortunately here at home, it's not south. It's basically parked just to our east. And with it being a circular high pressure most of the time, it has to ride around the edge of high pressure. That is going to cause it to turn right once it gets up to the I-10 corridor, instead of it happening down further south like we have been seeing here these last several systems. So this is by midnight, this band that's moving onshore now with potential for a few isolated tornadoes, very heavy rainfall at the coast, a couple of inches of rain per hour, not out of the question in some of these heavier storms. That's going to persist here at the beaches from 75 west as we go through about midnight. Fast forward to 2:30, there's the center of the storm, still way too far to our west to have any kind of a concern about hurricane force winds outside of maybe a strong thunderstorm producing some gusts over 50, 60 miles per hour. The sustained winds are just not going to happen with this system being that far west. But there it goes, moving up to the north-northeast, and landfall still subject to change. Dennis mentioned that there could even be a little bit of a swing to the west. but the latest models do try and bring it in more toward at least this model, I should say. Taylor County, Franklin County is a bit farther west, so somewhere between Franklin and Taylor County is a good bet. The situation here along their coast is not like our coast down here, though. There could be storm surge that exceeds 10 feet along the coast here in the Appalachian Bay, places like St. Mark's, Wakulla Beach, Shell Point, and then once you get east over toward Teton Beach, Horseshoe Beach, these areas here, a lot of you do some scalloping in these regions. You've been saying you drive up there and do some scalloping offshore of Teton Beach. But this coastline is much more rural and a lot more swamp and a lot more marsh area. So that's going to take the brunt of the storm surge, but there are those towns that are on the beach. They're pretty small towns, but populations nonetheless. And that's the danger zone for these areas. And this, again, like Dennis had said a second ago, we have never seen in modern records, so our records in Florida go back into the 1800s, so at least in the last 250 years, a storm in the Appalachian Bay that's this strong. If the center, which on this model doesn't show it, but the forecast track at 11 probably will be a bit farther west, if this goes over Tallahassee as a 115 to 130 mile per hour storm, this is going to shut the city down for a good 2 to 3 weeks, if not longer. So that's the concern in the Panhandle, is how strong this system could be, and the fact that everybody that's lived up there has never gone through a storm. Nobody's been alive long enough to go through a storm like this. So this is the first time this area, and everybody that may have 50, 60, 70, 80 years of living there, this is the first time they've ever had a threat such as this. And that's why Idalia is so much worse of a storm in this area. Down south, it seems like the last 10, 15 years, we've just had several hits of storms this powerful. So that's the situation up there, and that's why we're watching things very closely. Dennis, where do you want to go now? Do you want to talk storm surge?
I did want to mention, you were talking about high pressure. I don't want to get too sciencey on anybody, but you were talking about the fact that high pressure was really kind of not allowing that right turn until eventually when it goes around the perimeter of that high pressure. But in addition, what also that high pressure system is doing, to further Jason's football analogy, when a lineman goes behind a running back and tries to force him through the line because he doesn't have enough on his own, he picks up his forward speed. That's exactly what happened here. The storm actually at that point did go faster than it was before. So we haven't talked a lot, I was going to say the 7 day, but we haven't talked a lot about the forecast clearly, because the forecast, we all know what it's been and what it's going to be for tomorrow. We are going to have rain the first half of the day. I'll tell you, this is such a fast moving system now that by the afternoon, this will already have moved into Georgia, and we're going to see breaks in the cloud cover tomorrow. Tomorrow's big story, without any hesitation, is the flooding potential. We've been talking about that for the longest time. But in terms of our weather, in